Dynamite Network presents Football Time.
Hey, and welcome to the Football Time Show. We're here with Dynamite David, and we're going to get into our college football preview. We had to accelerate it a little bit this year due to health and safety protocols. We aren't going to be able to break down each conference really in depth and go into every team, but we will be able to break down each conference, give how we think the conference is going to go. And then a new thing, we got a $25,000 next egg to bet on the college football futures. And we got a handful of those picks to show you how to sort of maybe get into some preseason bets and win some big money. There's some nice underdogs in there. At least I got a couple of them. I saw a couple on yours. So, Dynamite, you ready to get into this college football season, even if we are starting a little bit late? Games start this weekend and real games start next week.
Yeah, we've got week 0 this weekend, so ready to dive into it. I know you're a little bit more experienced on this future side of things, but I'm ready to start it up with you, and who knows, maybe by the end of the year, my futures will pay out.
Yeah, well, we're diving you into futures. You might be a little bit more experienced till we get to our NFL show next week, and we got Achilles trying to work his way through some futures. We've gotten him on some win totals the last couple of years, so we'll see if we can get him into some futures bets. So let's kick this thing off. We're going to split it into two parts. Part one, we're going to go over the MAC, Conference USA, Sun Belt, the American Conference, and Mountain West. Then part two, we're going to get into the Big 12, Pac-12, ACC, Big 10, and SEC. We'll drop the MAC probably tonight, Thursday night. The other one with the Big 12s and all the bigger conferences on Friday night. So two parts. So let's kick it off. Let's get into the MAC. We have the MAC going here for each other. Interesting. We differed a little bit on how we went down on one side of the division here, and then pretty similar on the other side. You can definitely tell a difference in the divisions in this conference.
Oh, yeah,
One's
for sure.
Definitely loaded with a handful of really good teams. The other one, you're probably talking two for sure, and maybe, depending how you feel, on Ohio and Buffalo on the other. So let's start with the East. You got Kent State finishing first.
Yeah.
I have Kent State finishing first. I think we're on par with that. The other one, probably everybody's second favorite, Miami, Ohio. I have them 2. You have them 3. You moved Buffalo in there to 2. We disagreed a little on Buffalo. I thought they'd still be pretty solid last year. They turned out to have a pretty weak season. Why do you think Buffalo's going to sort of bounce back after the loss of Lance Leopold in a tough season last year?
I thought that tough season they had last year was a little bit of an outlier. I'm just trusting that program to bounce back a little bit this year, and I really wasn't as impressed with Miami as Ohio as you were. But like you said, this East Division, I think it's Kent State's to lose. I've got a few futures I liked with them as well. I just think they're going to run this division.
Yeah, I think Kent State will run this division too. I really like their football coach. I think he gets the best out of that squad. I'm curious to see if Buffalo can bounce back. I was really disappointed by them last year and how poorly they just seemed to drop off of Lance. They didn't even lose a ton of guys last year.
Yeah.
They still had a pretty good squad from the recruits they had. The other one in there, Ohio, I have them 3, you have them 4. They've been a traditional power since Frank Solich has left. They've sort of fallen off the map. Any chance they sort of find their rhythm and get back in this?
No, I think they're going to kind of be that. They're not going to be that top-tier team this year. It may take a few good recruiting years to get back up in there, but I think they're kind of middle-of-the-road MAC right now. Now, this being the weaker division, they may be able to pull out some wins and finish 5-6 win range. I think that's somewhere about maybe a little less than that, maybe a little higher than that. But with these MAC teams, I think you've got 2 or 3 across both division teams that are going to be your big dogs. I love Toledo in the other division, and then you're just going to have a really big cluster of teams that are going to be fighting for position there. So it'll be interesting to watch. I think the MAC. Just the talent in general this year is down from where we've been the past couple of years. I've been big on my MACtion. A lot of good players, a lot of talent. Some's gone to the NFL the past couple of years. A lot of good players have come through the MAC. This year, I just think it's really light talent-wise, and it's gonna hurt.
The disturbing thing about Ohio, I thought, was they lost a lot of games at home, and that used to be a fortress where they never would lose at home. So I don't see them bouncing back. I'm curious to see how Miami of Ohio plays this year. I thought they were really disappointing last year. People had expectations for them. They didn't seem to quite meet them. Akron, Bowling Green, I think we both assume they will be down at the bottom of the pack. Bowling Green played with a little life. Last year.
Yeah, they pulled off
a little spunk, but I don't think it's good enough to be more than that. So I look for that. Let's move to the western side of things where, honestly, I think Toledo probably has the best talent, but we saw with them last year, they probably had the best talent in this division. They weren't able to pull it off. And I think basically, other than maybe Ball State, probably throw Eastern Michigan out there, though. They've had pretty solid offense the last handful of years.
Oh, yeah.
I think, we have differences where I have Northern Illinois 1, you have Toledo 1, and you have Northern Illinois 5. I can easily see that, but I think any team, Toledo, Northern Illinois, Western Michigan, Central Michigan for sure, can probably battle for this. Health and sort of how teams start is really going to be important in this.
Well, and these MAC games, you could just get college football, college guys, you get the funkiness that happens. You never know what's going to happen. I'd like Toledo better than the rest, but I could see, either any of those Michigan teams, Western, Central, and Eastern. Either one of them could potentially jump up there and win this. This division is going to be more hotly contested, I think, than the East. But I do like Toledo as far as on paper.
Yeah.
I think they're the better team overall. Now, will that play out on the field? That's to be seen. I'm kind of bucking. Northern Illinois. They had a decent bounce back year last season. I'm kind of saying that was going against the norm there. I think they may regress to the norm again this season. That's why I have them below all those Michigan teams.
Yeah, I think you could look at it sort of two ways. Your way where, I think last year we were looking at them and they had a 2, win total over under.
Yeah.
Ended up way exceeding that, including that first 2 games where I think they played like neck and neck with, I think Nebraska, and then maybe beat one of the big dogs the week after that. I put them there because I think maybe they've refound their flow. Northern Illinois has always been sort of a dominant team in the MAC, and maybe last year sort of kickstarts it after a little run where some bad coaching. They didn't get really good recruits out of Illinois and Ohio. Maybe that comes back. That's why I have them there. I have Toledo too, but honestly, I could see any of these. If Toledo plays to their talent, they're probably going to be all right and win this. But, I just saw last year, they'd have quarter stretches where they were great.
Yeah.
And then turnovers or, giving up explosive plays. They drop the ball. So I have them too. But I'm going to keep my eye on Central and Western Michigan too. You never sort of know. I think they disappointed a little last year as well. I think we thought big things out of them. They didn't quite lead up to it. Anything out of Eastern Michigan or Ball State you're seeing. I mentioned Eastern Michigan. They have the offense, but speaking of giving up explosive plays, they tend to give up a lot of explosive plays.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many games we saw with Eastern Michigan last year where they had like 2-3 touchdown lead, and then you turn the game back on 5 minutes later, and it's a tie game. You're like, what the heck happened?
Yes.
That's a lot of those MAC games too.
Yes.
So I think that's what kind of makes them fun. A little risky to bet on though.
Yes, definitely so. You'll be the highest of highs and lowest of lows, pretty much within quarter to quarter.
It'll giveth and taketh away. That's for sure.
Definitely so. So I have Northern Illinois winning the MAC. You have Toledo winning the MAC. Let's get into some of our futures. Mm-hmm. I didn't have as many. I think I was with you, where it doesn't seem like this conference is probably as deep as it has been. A little bit of that is Ohio and Buffalo sort of coming back down to earth.
Yeah, and a lot of unknowns.
Yes.
This is, we were just discussed 1 through 5. It could go really either way. So
I took a couple of things here. One of them was Miami of Ohio at 16-1 to win the conference. I don't think they're going to win the conference, but you look at 16-1 in a division where they and Kent State are probably the only 2 teams really, truly separated themselves to battle. Then you get to the game at 16-1 in a head-to-head game at the end of the season. You don't know. I thought that was good value. Kent State division winner 3-1. I just mentioned 2 teams.
Yeah.
2 teams battling for 1 division spot, 3-1. I thought that was pretty good value. And Then conference champion Kent State at 8.5 to 1. I thought that was good value. Once again, either Kent State or Miami, Ohio, probably getting in that championship game. Then you're one game away from an 8.5 or a 16 to 1 win. I thought that was good value, but not a lot of sort of futures bets for me in the Mid-American. It didn't seem to fall that way, especially with the West, where I didn't want to be real bold because I think 3 or 4 teams could easily take that division. What are you looking at futures-wise?
Well, like I said earlier, there's water here. So I broke my $25,000 into $25,000 bets. So you'll get a little bit more futures selection and variety from Champ over here. But I've got about the same amount in the MAC as you do, and we're both on the same page on Kent State. I like that 3 to 1 to win the division. So I've got 1,000 on that, and I also like it's juiced a little to minus 145, but I think that over 5 line is an easy mark for them to make in that division. I didn't take the conference championship like you did. I think the winner from the West is going to win this conference.
I think that's a
the value's there, but I don't see Kent State being able to win the championship game if they get there. I also have Toledo to win the conference at plus 340, a little over 3 to 1 there, $1,000 on it. And I also like Buffalo. I told you I like Buffalo earlier. I've got them over 5.5. I think they could contend for that division. I've got them right behind Kent State. So
I saw that.
I think that line's right there. I think 6 is very possible.
Yeah. Little betting knowledge, so we get into it. I wanted to break down our bets. We're using a $25,000 bankroll, but pretty much anybody can use any bankroll. You just basically, how I break mine down, you take your bankroll and you sort of break it down by percentages. So if I really, really like a bet, like say a 5-unit bet or a 5% bet, so you take your whole bankroll, reduce it by 5%, that would be a $12.50 bet on a $25,000 bankroll. So anybody can follow along. If you basically have a $10 bankroll, you can just use the percentages. Now, you're getting into pennies at that point, but if you have like $100, you can use the same thing. It all equates to the same math. You just sort of work that out. So if I have like a $125 bet here, that's like 0.5% of my bankroll. If I have like a 1% bet, $250, work your way up through that. So I mean, anybody can do this with any bankroll they have. We're just using a $25,000 one to sort of get some bets here. We'll see how we do at the end of the year and how our futures go. All right,
we can look at that at our bowl game show.
Yes, that would probably be more entertaining than our actual bowl game show, especially now, which I don't think anybody's even going to play bowl games. Move on to our next conference, and let's head to Conference USA. Couple interesting ones here in Conference USA. I had fun with this one last year. You really liked this one last year.
Yeah.
And I was interested by our rankings here. We were really big on Western Kentucky last year, off to a really, really slow start, but worked their way into the championship game. I'm really big on Western Kentucky this year. We'll see if they work their way into the championship game. You're really big on UAB. I have always been a really big UAB fan here. So what made you stick with UAB as one? They've been the dominant team in Conference USA. I've been a little off them because Bill Clark left. I know assistants have taken over, but I think that guy was the heart of UAB. I'm curious how big a drop, sort of like Buffalo last year, if that's going to be a drop.
Their coach, he's been involved in this offense for 3 years now. I think they have the most returning talent in the conference. Western Kentucky lost a lot of pieces to what they had on that team last year that I was really big on. So I just look for UAB to rise back to the top of the crop, even though they lost their coach there. I both liked my Roadrunners there at number 2. I think they're really starting to build a good program down there.
Mm-hmm. We both have UT San Antonio at number 2. Do you think they can sort of find that magic? Have they built that program where it's not a once every sort of 5 years? It's more every year, sort of like UAB. You know what you're getting with UAB every year. Solid defense, good running game. They will be there.
They do have some talent to replace this year, but I think they're going to be right there. Their schedule may not be as favorable this season. But I think they could be right there in the mix. Western Kentucky, I've got them at 3.
Yes.
I could see them jump the switch spots. I just think the talent loss there is going to be tough to replace.
Yeah, I think the talent loss will be tough to replace, but I really like that coach. I think that's a little bit of a plug-and-play offense.
It's a good offense.
Where, the talent can probably just come back and their offense will be there. Can their defense continue to sustain it? I thought it played pretty well last year. It's certainly not to the levels that it was in 2019, 2020, where they couldn't score at all and they were shutting teams down. It's maybe last year it was a little bit of that perfect balance where the defense was still good enough, offense was on point. I think they've sort of found their flow again too. That's why I moved them in there. Talking about other contenders in here, I want to throw UTEP. I want to throw North Texas. Are there any others you think maybe could crash this party, or are you just sort of looking at a pretty small window of a couple teams?
I honestly, and I know you disagree with me on this. I've got UAB on a whole different tier level ahead of these guys. I really think they're going to be strong this year and they're going to dominate this conference. I think the competition between 2 and 4 can vary greatly, but I really see UAB as the front runners.
Yeah, I definitely think I would put UAB up there talent-wise. I'm just curious what the coaching miss happens there. I'll throw Western Kentucky, then I drop into a block. I'm really curious about UTEP. I thought they played pretty well.
Great game this weekend, North Texas, UTEP.
Yeah, really well. And you know how I like North Texas. They are always pretty spunky. They're usually a bit more spunky at home than on the road, but they're always hovering around there. And if they can get off to a pretty good start with a win versus UTEP, maybe they can be a factor in there. They were a factor in the sort of middle of the season before they sort of petered out. But I don't see much else from the likes of Middle Tennessee, Florida Atlantic, Louisiana Tech, and then you got your really, really drop off. And even though I like them in Charlotte, they don't defend it all, and FIU. So interesting conference. Where are you going on your futures wise? Conference USA.
This is probably one of my least futures bets I've got in this conference, and like I said, I'm big on UAB this season. I'm taking them to win the conference. All my other bets, I've got 1,000 on that as well.
Yeah. I got a couple in this one. I'm really heavy on Western Kentucky.
Yeah.
I got their over at 8.5 on plus 120. Really like that one, using 750 of that. Conference champions at plus 450. I'm using 250 on that. I'm going against you. I think UAB will have a little bit of a drop-off. Now, that's totally counter to everything. I think I introduced you to UAB about 3 years ago and telling you how good their defense and run game was, and I'm off them a little bit. Now, a little bit of that is their win total's 8.5. That's 9 wins. That's
tough.
A lot of wins, especially if you take that under and you get even money on that.
Well, and especially, you like those other teams.
Yes.
So that you're seeing some losses there
That's
if you like
exactly
Western
right.
Kentucky over them and UTSA.
Yeah. So I like that UAB under at 250 under the 8.5. I really, really like the UTEP over 5.5. Now, you look at their schedule, they're playing a lot of big dogs, so they're going to have a lot of losses early, but
they're going to have to get those conference games.
But I look at it a little bit like Western Kentucky, who last year you were high on. They started off like 0-5.
Really tough schedule.
Yeah, really tough schedule. And then once they got into conference, they started racking up wins. So I think that's something UTEP can do.
It helps that the bottom 6 of this conference is pretty poor.
Yeah, and they don't have huge home field advantage either.
Yeah.
Other than sort of Louisiana Tech, everybody else, it's pretty easy to go into their home stadium and win games. So I really like that UTEP over 5.5. I think they'll get to 6 wins. So I got 1,000 on that, and then taking a little bit of a long shot at 20-1 for UTEP to win the conference championship at 125. I think that's decent value, especially since this isn't a division thing.
Yeah.
So the top 2 teams get in there, and if they can be in that mix, which we saw last year, where there were like 3 or 4 teams all flip-flopping those last 3 weeks. And so once you get in that championship game, if you have a 20-1, you can basically ensure that any way you want. So really like the UTEP over, though. That would be really big, and nice little long shot bet at 20-1.
Yep.
We move on to our next conference, and we're going to move to the Sun Belt.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Little changes there.
Little changes there. They add a little bit of depth, which is interesting because I think this conference has been a little bit underrated the last couple. James Madison comes in. They aren't eligible to win it, but I will say I wouldn't be real aggressive taking against James Madison. They're one of the top subdivision teams. They've been in the playoffs. They've won titles. Do not go in there thinking they're going to get ripped because, honestly, I think if they were in the West, I would have looked at them to finish in the top three. The fact that they moved into the division with Coastal and Appy State and Marshall sort of unbalances things a little bit. So let's start in the East because that's where a lot of the depth is. Coastal, Appy State, Marshall who joins. You stick with Appy State. I stuck with Appy State. I think Marshall might be able to sort of wiggle their way in here. I'm curious how they work, and Coastal still has that offense. We saw a little bit of regression on that defensive side of the ball. How do you think this East Division is going to play out?
It's going to come down to a few good games. You know, that App State Coastal game has been really big the last couple of years. But yeah, like you said, Marshall, I think they're going to fall in right behind those two teams. I don't know if they can get up to that level of Coastal App State to where they're almost competing at a national level. Or Coastal was. But I think they could be right there. I think App State's defense is what's going to carry them through. The culture defensively there is going to help them. But Coastal's got the defense too. Can they restock on offense? We'll see. But the biggest factor I look at here, and I took this in one of my props. If you look at a team that's been pretty good the last couple of years, is Georgia State. Yeah, I think they're going to have a tremendous drop off this year. You look at their schedule; they're running a really brutal schedule this year. Yeah. Now the potential's there for them to pull off some major upsets and really jump up. But I think this Georgia State team, they've lost too much talent. They're going to fall to the bottom of this division, I think.
Yeah. I see them dropping more than you. You have them 5th. I have them all the way at 7th. Yeah. I just think the talent drop off. They've gotten off to a little bit of slow starts the last couple of years and sort of heated up as the season has gone on, and sort of by that back end, especially last year, they really started playing good football where they were scaring those top teams. But I do like the coach, but I think it's one of those things where the talent isn't as easily replenished there. Now, granted, there's a lot of talent there, but you're battling Coastal Carolina, you're battling Appy State, you're battling Georgia Southern, you're battling Troy, you're battling Louisiana Lafayette for all those guys. And I think it just sort of, they will take time. I think they will be good maybe again next year. Maybe they do catch fire towards the end of the year, but I think with their schedule, you mentioned it.
Tough non-conference schedule this year, too.
And I think they'll start to get down confidence-wise, and then they're going through the gauntlet in the East. Yeah. This is one where I think James Madison, you think Georgia State can beat them, but James Madison has the same level of players as they would. So I just think it'll be tough for Georgia State to sort of respond. I'm curious to see how Georgia Southern, sort of after a year of, hell last year, who has also usually been a pretty good solid team in the Sun Belt, completely fell off the map. If they can sort of find their groove, but I think this is pretty much a 3-man race, Appy, Coastal, and Marshall. I'm really interested to see how Marshall does here because they were a little hot and cold. I remember you had stretches where you really wanted to bet on them, and they'd sort of let you down, but then they go on a run and win a couple games, and you were always like, what's
they had a very experienced team last season. But, I just want to talk about James Madison a little bit. You mentioned them. This is a team that knows how to win. Yeah. Don't be surprised if they come in and pull off some upsets in here. I think they're going to be kind of right in that mix with Marshall. I've got them just behind Marshall at 4th in this division. Talent's good, but even with just the mindset of knowing how to go in and win at a place is big. Now, at this level, going up, moving up, could be a little interesting for them. But I think there could be some value plays on James Madison, especially earlier in the season.
Well, we've seen it a couple times where these subdivision teams, the good ones, and James Madison is a good one, have moved up into these conferences. And
guess who used to be one? App State.
That's what they can do this and make this level because they sit in a huge nice recruiting base there in the DMV area. Yeah. And they get sort of secondary guys who are still really, really good football players. So I don't look for them to struggle as much as people might think they will. So I'm curious to see how they play out. I'm curious to see how Marshall plays out. Let's move to the West. This one was interesting. You stuck with Lafayette. I know the talent's there, but once again, that's a coach move. And
a lot of players left with them.
Talent went to Florida. Now, they have usually been a pretty solid program, even before the coach was there. They usually sit there and are in top 3. I really like Troy. I like the way they sort of played last year. They were a little bit spunky. They have a good home field advantage. They struggled on the road. They weren't quite at the level of those, top tier teams, but they were able to beat up on the sort of crappy teams in this division. I'm looking for them to have a jump. Lafayette to drop back a little bit. You're really big on Southern Miss. I've read some good things on Southern Miss. They were a little bit like Troy, too, where you saw at times they really, really played well, but then at times they just stunk the joint out. So how did you sort of read this West Division, especially with sort of the dominant team Lafayette? A lot of exits, a lot of coach exits. This is certainly the weaker side of the bracket here.
I looked at this, I actually really like Southern Miss. I think they've got good coaching. I think Arkansas State's brought in some good talent. Yeah. I like these two teams, but I had to go with my knee-jerk reaction, which was Louisiana Lafayette. Just looking at this division, I just think this Louisiana team's on the level of the Coastal and the App State, and I just think when you look at the rest of this West Division, it's just not as deep. Yeah. So I think you're going to have to go with the team that's been there, that's done it. I think they've got a good shot at repeating. But like I said, I think that Southern Miss and Arkansas State, I like them behind the rest of those teams. You like Troy. I'm not so big on Troy. We'll see how it goes. I'd much rather take the Arkansas State or Southern Miss.
I was going to say, I'm interested in Arkansas State and see how they do. They started off playing pretty solid football, and then sort of, I think just the season wore on them, and then they started getting lit up by a bunch of teams. I'm curious how second year Butch Jones does. Yeah. I wasn't quite ready to jump them over like a Lafayette. I wasn't ready to jump them over like a Southern Miss or a Troy. So I think better football comes out of them. I don't know if they're quite ready to make that leap sort of up the standings there.
I do think this is Butch Jones can get successful in. I think he can build a winning program here. Can it be this year? I think maybe, but I think they're going to keep improving for sure.
Yeah, I'm curious to see them next year.
Yeah. I think Louisiana will keep regressing. Yes. So I think as that talent from the good Louisiana teams continues to move on out, they're going to come back to the level of the other teams in this division.
I got some futures in this one. This is a big one for my futures. So I mentioned Troy number. They usually do play a really tough schedule. Once again, it's a tough schedule, but I think they beat up on most of these teams in the West. So I think that 6.5 number is really low, especially even money. So I got 750 riding on Troy over that 6.5. I thought the division winner at plus 360, a little over 3.5 to 1. Really, I mean, if you break this down, you're looking at one team, and then you're probably looking on a level of Arkansas State, Southern Miss. I don't think any of the others are even in.
And you like Troy
and
more.
I like Troy more. So you're giving me 3.5 to 1 on that. If there's regression from Lafayette, I think they sit right there. And then conference champion at 10 to 1. Now, I think we all think probably Coastal, Appy State, and even if like a Marshall jumps in there, they'd definitely be favored in that game. But once again, if you can get to that game and you have a 10 to 1 number, you can start playing around with how you do things. So I got a 3 big bets on Troy here. So conference champion at 10 to 1, 250, division winner at 360, 500, and over that 6.5. I really like that at 750. Another one I really like here, Law Monroe, over 2.5 wins. We saw it last year. They have good coaching there. Now, I don't think they have a lot of talent there. They do have a lot of transfer portal people, but they snuck up and beat some people. Now, granted, a lot of those situations when they beat people were weird, but they were like the first team ever to have like 2 30 to 1 outright money line wins. Yeah. So
weird happens in the Sun Belt.
That's what I mean. I think they can grow, and you can't tell me the bottom of that Sun Belt, like Law Monroe, can't sneak some wins.
Yeah.
So
South Alabama.
Yeah, that's. I think 2.5 is just really, really low, especially when they got a couple other cupcakes in there that can get their win. So I really, really like that. I thought Marshall division winner, much like I explained, at 3.2 to 1.
Yeah.
You're looking at 3 teams in that division who probably can separate themselves. So I think there's good value.
I think that's a big jump for Marshall, though.
Yes.
I disagree with you there. I don't know if they're quite on that App State.
Yeah, I'm just curious to see if they can get to that level. Maybe a new conference they aren't seen as much, where it's people don't know how to guard them. I'm curious what Coastal Carolina looks like. I think offensively they'll be okay, but I'm curious defensively if they can hang up. And then you're just sort of throwing Appy State in there.
Yeah.
And I just like the value of 320 to win that division with probably 3 teams that you're looking at. And I think that's good value. Conference champion at 5.5 to 1. Once again, who's ever coming out of the East is going to be heavily favored in that game. So if you get that 320 going at 5.5 in that game where they're playing, Lafayette, and then a drop off to any of those teams, I think Marshall would be favored over a Troy, over an Arkansas State, over a Southern Miss if they get there. They wouldn't probably be favored over a Lafayette, depending on how the seasons went for the 2. But the other 3, I think they'd be favored over. Mm-hmm. So you're getting 5 to 1 if they can get to that championship game. I think that's pretty good value, too. I got 125 on conference champion there. So what are you looking at in the
I've just got one play here, and this is one I kind of wish I had jumped on earlier. I think this is actually, if you look through my futures bets, this is probably one I would put as one of my number 1 confidence picks here. It is a little juiced.
That's funny because I got a couple in there that are in my top 5 as well. So.
This one's a little juiced. Like I said, I wish I jumped on it sooner, but I think this is a complete no-brainer. I've got Georgia State under 7.5 at minus 150. I just think there's no way they're even sniffing this number. I would put Georgia State more around 4.5, maybe 5. So I don't even think we're going to get close to that 7.5. Minus 150, you're taking a little bit of a tax there, but I still think it's a sure thing.
Yeah, I looked at that one hard, and you mentioned it. I think the juice just sort of, I was like, do I want this with that much juice off my, sort of bet here? Especially, like I said, if they get hot like they did last year and start closing out wins, a couple of those Sun Belt teams who just sort of packed it in towards the end, they get cheap wins, and then you're sort of those last 2 weeks, you're holding your breath whether they can cover that line. So that's what we got in the Sun Belt. And some decent teams, getting better and better each year. American Athletic Conference. I think this one's going to be a good one. I'm really interested in this one. We had some interesting looks here. You stuck with the opposite team that made it to the conference championship. The team I was big on last year and had a futures bet on. I bailed on that. I no longer want to be in the Dana Holgerson lifestyle game, even though it did win me money on Houston. Then you go Cincinnati, Central Florida. I really like Central Florida this year. I think they'll sort of find themselves and dominate. They had a handful of games last year where
couple plays
that they should have won. I think we had a bet on a couple of them. The Louisville one sticks out really big in my head on that one that we ended up losing, that we should have won, and then Gabriel broke his collarbone on that Louisville play where he threw the pick and then got tackled, and things just went bad. I think they stepped back up. I'm curious to see how Cincinnati sort of restocks. Offensively, I think they'll be fine because they play a pretty pro-style offense. I think that'll be pretty plug and play, but I'm curious defensively if they can sort of stay to that level. They had a lot of elite secondary guys, a handful of elite pass rushers in there. They had a really good defense. Can they replace those guys and continue to sort of dominate this conference? I'm curious how you looked at this and broke this down.
Yeah, I thought we were both kind of on the same page on Cincinnati. I looked around the country. A lot of people are still big on Cincinnati this year to win the conference. I don't know if they can quite get it.
I just think the conference is too deep to be like, they're going to be back-to-back. There are a lot of good teams in here.
I just really like this Houston team. I know it is scary riding with Dana Holgerson out there because he sure knows how to blow some games. But I think their talent is just on a different level. Cincinnati, I'm not sure if they're going to be reload. One wild card team here that I'm really interested in, they've kind of been up and down here lately, is SMU. I've got them at 4th in my spot here. I could see them potentially moving up to 2 here. We'll see how it goes down there.
the talent's there. I just thought the coach leaving for TCU.
Yeah.
I don't know what that will do to them. But, there were games last year where SMU just looked gangbusters. Speaking of a game, first said Houston that they should have won and ended up not. I think SMU, I was a little more pushed back because I wanted to see what they look like with the coach. So I put them at 6, but we both have Memphis at 5. Memphis could be at that 6th spot. Memphis could probably be all the way up to 2. I think that's how deep this is.
Yeah.
You just sort of want to see how these teams come out. The only one I thought we were really different on, I really like East Carolina.
Yeah.
I thought they finished the season really, really well. They were really perky early in the year. They had a couple games where they should have won and ended up losing. That South Carolina game sticks out in my head because I had South Carolina. I think they had like 500 yards. South Carolina's like 50 and somehow found a way to lose that game. But I'm not complaining. I won money on that game. So, but I really think their jump is going to be happening this year. I'm looking to see that. So I'm really heavy on East Carolina. But I'm curious where the cutoff line for you is in the American, because I think there are about 6 or 7 teams in here who I think could at least challenge for the conference championship game.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's right around that 6 or 7. I think the line is either right above or right below Tulsa.
Yeah.
I like Tulsa a little better than you. I won a lot of bets on Tulsa last year, both for and against them.
Yes.
They're an interesting team to bet on.
Yes.
But I think that line, I think they could kind of move above the line or below the line depending on how some of these games go. But I think you've got to have Cincinnati, SMU, Houston. Memphis is kind of right there on that line as well.
Yeah.
I could see them moving way above the line. I could see Memphis dropping below the line. So there's a little bit of a gray area there, but definitely there's a clear 6 or 7. And then once you get below that, you're kind of in the garbage chute there. Just teams that have no chance, and Temple and Navy, not really big on Tulane much either.
Yeah, at least Tulane sort of can give you a game at home. That would be, now they aren't going to win anything, but at least they have players at home who can. AAC, right. What did you go with? I did not have a ton here. I just thought I don't have a read on what Cincinnati's going to do. I don't have a read on what Memphis is going to do.
Yeah.
I had Houston last year, and I don't want in that game again, especially when they were probably the second best team easily, and half the time they didn't look like the second best team. So I just wanted nothing to do with them. So really, I got one bet. I got East Carolina over the 6.5. I think that's a lock. I love that bet. Over the 6.5 at only minus 115.
Not much juice, yeah.
At 750. I love that. And then conference champion. Long shot, really long shot. They probably aren't going to win the conference championship. They probably won't even be at the conference championship game. But I thought value, 22-1. I mean, that's a lot for
especially if they finish where you've got them.
Towards that back half of that year, they were probably the second or third best team in the American Conference. So if they continue that trend, then they're fighting to get in that championship game. And if you can get a championship game where 2 teams and you have 22-1, then you can make some money off that. So at 22-1, I have East Carolina Conference champion at 250. What do you got in the AAC?
Well, I've got a couple. This first one is more of a lean. I don't feel like Memphis is going to continue where they've been these past few years. I see them dropping off a little bit. This one's another one that's juiced pretty heavy, but another one that I see as a lock, under 7.5. They've got a tough road, some tough non-conference games. I'm taking Memphis under 7.5. And then, I'm jumping on the train you rode all last year. I'm going to take Houston to win the conference. I think the talent in the conference is lower than it was last year. So I think
that probably means Dana's going to win 4 games.
Well, I think they're the team that retained, and not to mention,
if there's someone going to lose at Tulane, it will be him.
So I've got Houston to win the conference at plus 235.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty solid bet. I mean, they have a lot of talent. I should say
the value was better last year.
The value was better last year, and they made it to the championship game. So, hey. Right, maybe they can do it to the Mountain West to wrap up our part 1. Last year you read it pretty well. You didn't think Boise was going to make it. You thought they'd fall back a little bit. They did fall back a little bit where, 9 wins is falling back. It
Yeah.
is for them. I don't think any of us really had Utah State making the leap they did, but they made a nice little leap. Fresno State was really good at times and then just had a couple weird games that they dropped. San Jose State finally came back to earth after a miracle year. Air Force, really, a lot of talent once again. So how do you think this is I looked at this. I wanted to be sort of different, but I just went chalk. I thought Boise State, I thought San Diego State probably were head and tails above both. Let's start out in the sort of Mountain Division up there. Anyone going to be able to challenge Boise State here? Utah State made a nice run, but I can't buy any of these teams. Maybe Air Force. They seem to give Boise State trouble. But I just didn't think anybody had the talent to really contend with them this year.
Yeah, I've got this one lining up pretty similar to last year. I don't think Boise's going to lose some of these games that they lost this last season. I think Boise's going to continue to dominate. I didn't take their futures on the over number, but I think it was around 9.5 or 10. I think that's a good chance they go over there. This may be a one-loss Boise State team. I do still think that the next two are Utah State and Air Force. I just don't think those other three teams.
If Boise State wins that Oregon State game in the first week, they're going way over. So, I mean, basically you can just judge off that.
I think this is a Boise State team going in towards the end of the year. Conference strength of schedule, it's not there, but it could be one of those where people are trying to make an argument. This could be a playoff team. I don't know if the schedule's there. They're going to have to really dominate. Definitely undefeated to be there in the playoffs. But I think this is going to be a return to power Boise State season. I really did like what we had from Utah State last year. I just don't see them repeating it.
Yeah, it's a little bit like Northern Illinois. Same sort of thing. Everybody thought they were going to do really poor. They did not. They made that jump. And Utah State has traditionally been a pretty solid football program.
Yeah.
So if you think they're going to regress back, or you just sort of think they're going to continue on that stretch. So I didn't see a lot. Wyoming talent has really dropped off. They were not a fun team to watch last year. They were a fun team to take unders on. I will say that, except for the one random game where 90 points were scored. But other than that, I can't buy Colorado State. Air Force is there, but back-to-back years where they win, I can't get there. So I just think Boise State's going to run around with this. The West is a little bit more interesting.
Definitely.
You like Fresno State. You liked them last year. Still good talent there. This is one of those things where DeBoer leaves. I just wonder how that's going to go. I'm sticking with my tried and true San Diego State because basically you know exactly what you're getting. You're getting defense, you're getting running game. Maybe they drop one or two where they can't score enough points, but they're just going to win a lot of games. And I'm curious where Fresno, without the coach there, follows.
Believe me, I am not confident in this Fresno. This is probably one of the most murky divisions in college football. Outside of Hawaii, I think everyone is capable of winning this division.
Don't steal my thunder. I'm going to be going a UNLV kick here.
It's like you just said. I think 1 through 5 in this division could go any way. I'm taking Fresno just because I think there's some players there that can still make some moves. Now, how much of that was brought by their coach and their coaching staff? And he did build this up.
Yes.
So it could get torn down.
Yeah.
Just as fast as he built it up.
Well, that's what I was curious about because Fresno State seems to go in peaks and valleys. They have a really good coach there. They're highest of highs, and then they seem to go through these valleys where if they don't get the right coach, it's 2-3 wins.
I've got Nevada at 4 in this division. I actually really like this Nevada team.
Well, that's what I was curious about because everything I read seemed to not like this Nevada team, and I'm like, I kind of like this Nevada team, and I thought they were pretty solid last year. They weren't spectacular, but it just confused me why everybody seemed to be so down at Nevada, especially when it's tough to go there and play. I didn't quite understand why everybody was picking them in the bottom. I'm much more down on San Jose State and Hawaii in here. And then I mentioned UNLV. Now, there was a lot of UNLV plays last year. They didn't win a lot, but they covered a lot. So I just sort of like their growth. I'm curious to see if they can sort of spunk up here and jump into wins.
This could be a team that kind of fills the void
Yeah.
if Fresno State regresses. Because they're kind of along, they're maybe not quite as big as Fresno State, but that's where Fresno was.
Yes.
3 or 4 years ago, talent-wise. So, and UNLV was in a lot of games last year. So, yeah, I'm kind of right there with you. But again, I just think, this could go so many different ways.
Well, yeah.
My futures bets in this conference are very, very thin.
Yes.
Now, I'm sure I haven't looked at yours in there on the futures just because there's so much uncertainty.
If you feel like aggressive, especially in this West Division, I'd be a little bit more pulled back in the Mountain Division with Boise State. But in this, like you said, if you feel like Nevada's going to be better, I think you jump all over this because you don't know what Fresno State is. You know exactly what San Diego State is. That's probably going to be a 9-10 win team, 2-3 losses, depending on what sort of offense comes out of there. So I think if you have a feel on one of these, you probably aggressively go out of that West Division and jump on one of these. Even as much as I don't like them, like San Diego State 2 years ago, they made that jump. We talked about Utah State and Air Force making that jump last year. It sits right there. Even you could talk me into Hawaii. Now, they have, of course, the problem coming into the States and struggle on the road, but everybody also has the problem of going there and partying for 3 nights and then trying to play a football game at midnight. So, it's wide open in that West, I think. So if you have a strong feel, you probably should grab a couple of those odds because a lot of them are really, really long. So let's get into our one. Futures. Wyoming over 5 at -135. That just seemed low. I don't think Wyoming's very good, but I think they can get to 6 wins. I think their home field is worth 3 or 4 wins, especially for some of these lower level, Mountain West teams. So I just thought that was a little bit low. I think they can get to 6 wins. You also don't have the half on that, so you get 5, you get your push, you get your money back.
Yep.
I think 4 wins would be really not something I would see even if I think Wyoming's down. So I thought there was good value there. San Diego State, we mentioned it, over 7.5 at -120.
Almost even money.
Yeah, this team wins 8, 9, 10 games every year. I admit it's never fun to watch them play football, but they're
usually playing at 11 o'clock at night.
But they win football games. They always play a Pac-12 team. They always beat them, and everybody is stunned, except for everybody who watches every year when they go down there, shut down some Pac-12 team who has fake offense, and they just run the ball on them. I think that over 7.5, that's a really good value there at -120. You're pretty much almost even money on that. I mentioned UNLV, over 4.5 wins. Now, this is juiced to the hilt at -165. This is one of the few ones I did do that was really juiced. But this is, like I said, it's a field play. I think UNLV, they were in a lot of games. They were sort of spunky last year. Now, I could have my heart broken. I've had my heart broken by UNLV football numerous times throughout my life. So I just think they'll hit that over 4.5, 5, 6 wins. Maybe they can work their way into a bowl game. And then division winner prop. This is what I was talking about. UNLV at 25-1, division winner. I mean, if Fresno State falls back, you're just basically throwing a Yahtzee board for dice there other than San Diego State at 25-1 just to win that division.
Yeah,
I think there's value there. So I did a small one on 62.50 in there. So it's only 0.25% of the bankroll, but hey, 25-1, go after it.
Yeah, so I've just got one futures in this one, and I talked about Nevada. I've got them 4th in this division, but I still kind of like this team.
I looked at that one as well.
It's +110 for over 4.5.
Yeah.
I think they're definitely getting 5 wins here.
I think it's the same thing as Wyoming. Their home field wins them 3 games, 4 games a year.
Yeah. So I like this. You're getting even money here. So I think this is another one of my up there high confidence picks here. So that's the only futures bet I've got in this conference.
All right. Light on that concludes our part 1. Be sure to catch part 2. We'll drop that in a couple days. You'll love that one. We're getting into the Big 5 conferences.
Power 5.
Sort of what might be left of the Big Five conference. It might be a Big Two in a couple years when we do this show. So be sure, tune in for part 2. That's our show, and we're out. All right, you want to take a couple minutes or just go?
I'm okay if you are.
All right.
You want to get a drink and
Give me
stretch a
second
little
to
bit?
Stretch.
That was good. I think that was right at like 30, 45 minutes.
Greenlight Network presents Football Time.